Open channel D. Very good. Hello, Alan.
Hey, Rocco. It's good to see you again. And,
You as well.
Looking forward to talking about our favorite tailor shop.
Indeed. Yeah, we had a similar talk last time at the SpyCon a couple of years ago, and I'm very pleased to be
2 years ago already.
I believe it has been, maybe 3 even. It's
Wow.
time flies when you're having fun. Of course, time has pretty much ground to a halt the last few months. It actually feels like a year ago is a year ago now, but it's good to see you again, even virtually.
Yeah, same here. Shame we can't be together in Atlanta, but this is a great way to do things.
Yeah, it sure is. It's beats nothing, right?
Very true. Very true.
Excellent. Yeah. So, Alan, let's tell a little bit about ourselves. Would you like to go first?
Sure. For those folks who haven't met me or seen me at cons or whatever, or online, my name's Alan Porter. I'm a spy geek and just a general pop culture geek, but particularly spies, and best probably known for James Bond. Do a lot of stuff around James Bond. Written one book on Bond, got another one coming soon-ish, I hope, sitting at the publishers, so I hope it's on its way. And also have been on and off in the background researching a project around U.N.C.L.E. on and off for years, but other projects keep getting in the way, but sometime that might see the light of day. So been a big U.N.C.L.E. fan pretty much from when it originally aired in the UK, when I was a wee boy, and stayed an U.N.C.L.E. fan all the time. And just sitting across from me here, I'm just looking at my bookcase, and I have all the U.N.C.L.E. novels, all the U.N.C.L.E. Digest magazines, all the U.N.C.L.E. comics, and all the DVDs and all sorts of U.N.C.L.E. stuff. And I have a U.N.C.L.E. Twitter account, @U.N.C.L.E. Lexicon, where we've been posting pictures of magazine covers and all sorts of stuff recently. So.
I am remiss. I don't think I'm following that. I'll have to fix that.
Yes, you will.
Indeed, indeed. My name is Rocco Jerome. I am also a spy fiction enthusiast. I can never seem to defeat the fact that I was born in 1978, and so I missed a lot of these things on the first go-around. I often like to say that I'm nostalgic for your childhood as much as I am my own. I'm a writer. I have a podcast, just like everybody else seems to have in the Western world. I have a radio show, few books, jack of many trades, master of none, I guess is the cliche way to put it. And the man from U.N.C.L.E. means a lot to me as well. It's interesting because, you know, when we did this last time, there was a whole lot of James Bond programming, which is fantastic. But it's interesting how the man from U.N.C.L.E. has sort of been lost in the shuffle, as it were.
Yeah, it sort of comes and goes. As I was actually listening to a podcast recently with a bunch of folks from the U.N.C.L.E. production team involved, and one of the things that they were saying there was that U.N.C.L.E. never quite totally disappears, but it sort of goes quiet and dormant for a while. But if you go on any of the social media platforms, there's an U.N.C.L.E. community somewhere on that social media platform. So it never like completely disappears like some of the other spy shows have done from popular culture, but it's not at the same level as Bond or some of the, you know, Bourne or some of the others, but it's always there or thereabouts, and there's always a core group of fans, core group of people who are interested in it, and it still seems to generate new generation, bring in new generations of fans as well as the years go by. So I guess it's in some ways it's the forgotten stepchild of Bond with the Fleming connection as well, but I think there's still a definite core interest in it. And whenever I go out wearing this, there's usually somebody who I only get 2 reactions. There's always somebody who like recognizes it, or people ask me what the abbreviation stands for.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then you can say anything, really. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Familiar. It's one of those shows too, where since it was so wildly different from season to season, if somebody is a fan of U.N.C.L.E., it's sort of a matter of which iteration they're familiar with. They saw the the color seasons, they might think of it as sort of a camp show, or certainly the first season, it's very much a straight ahead spy fiction piece of work.
Yeah, I mean, well, to an extent, the aborted fourth season was very straight melodrama as well.
Yeah.
It sort of resorted back to that early
Return to form.
Yeah, but in the middle, particularly the third season, third season was definitely high camp comedy, but they were trying to coattail on Batman, I think, and Batman's success at the time, and do something similar. Particularly when they introduced the girl from U.N.C.L.E, it was very much trying to go that route. It is a very, as you say, sort of to an extent up and down show. I love the first season. I love the black and white first season. I think
that's easily my favorite as well.
Yeah. I think that's U.N.C.L.E at its purest is that first season.
Yeah, when you take those first episodes and then compare them to, say, Napoleon battling a man in a gorilla suit, it's certainly amazing how much it changes, and it speaks a lot to how much the pop culture of the 60s really changed from year to year in terms of what was popular and what sort of a dragon they were chasing in the production room.
Yeah, I think it's also, if you look at that first season, it was very distinct. The Norman Felton, who came up with the idea and fine-tuned it from his early meetings with Ian Fleming, and really Man from U.N.C.L.E is his thing. Then Sam Rolfe on the writing, production side, they very much had a clear vision that went through that first season. And then Sam Rolfe left. And there sort of seemed to be a bit of a revolving door of producers for a while. And I think it was a show that really needed, to use the modern parlance, a showrunner, needed somebody with a common vision. I don't think it had that after season one. I think the first season was the only one that, and even though you could see they were still trying stuff out to see what worked, I think it still had that coherence that was missing from the rest of it, which is why I think it tonally ended up a little bit of a mess it was. But I think the lead characters really, and the central concept really helped carry it through those ups and downs of the following seasons. But I think if I was somebody said I've never seen it before, what should I watch? I would suggest they just sit down and watch the first season.
Yeah, for sure, back to front. I mean, there's a lot of very intriguing stories in there. It's very much about sort of the day-to-day of spycraft in a way that I think that James Bond didn't necessarily touch upon in those days as much. It was there was certainly very much high adventure elements, but there was also always that sense of there was a certain, I don't know if realism is the right word, but it felt like it had a certain sort of believability to it, for sure.
Oh yeah, I think there's a couple of things that really play to that. I think one was just completely by accident was the fact that, to get around the United Nations suing them and say they couldn't use the UN in the title, that they put up that it came to that agreement that they had to state in every episode that this was not the United Nations. And instead of trying to force it into the dialogue, they came up with the idea of putting the thing up at the end. Thanks, this episode was done with the cooperation of the United Network Command for Law and Enforcement, which made people think that was a real organization that had actually helped out with the TV show. So, there was that side of it. And I think, which was very clever, and, a gag that they kept going on everything pretty much going forward. And I think the other side of it is they had this concept basically of the innocent in every episode. Where somebody would get dragged into the intrigue, and you can never really see yourself as an everyday person getting caught up in James Bond's adventures.
Yeah.
But you could almost expect to sort of get a knock on the door and Napoleon Solo saying, "I need this particular thing that you're good at. Come and help me save the world today."
Yeah.
You could sort of see yourself in. And obviously, as the series went on, those innocents became more and more beautiful models, and it became a little bit more unrealistic. But certainly, earlier on when he was dragging along a 12-year-old kid, or somebody who a housewife who happened to be the ex-girlfriend of the guy that they were going after, or somebody with scuba diving experience or whatever, you could and again, I think it gave it, as you said, that there was that two levels of reality. There was anybody could get involved in these adventures, and just that little trick of making it seem like this was a real organization, you know.
Yeah.
And I have heard stories that during the 60s, people would actually go into the United Nations building and ask to see the U.N.C.L.E headquarters, even though
Oh, wow.
they...
That's excellent. Yeah.
So,
And that of course, sort of brings us to the gun, which I always heard stories that the gun received as much fan mail as anyone else on the show. And there was always this sort of a debated idea of whether or not that gun could actually work as shown on the show.
yeah, yeah. And I think also, to an extent, some of that was, U.N.C.L.E was one of the first shows that was really driven a little bit by merchandising as well.
Yeah.
That, you know, the toy manufacturers would say, hey, you know, people are really, you know, interested in the gun. Can we get it in the stories more? And the fact, again, going back to the realism thing, the gadgets were based on real things. You know, I mean, you know, open Channel D. You know,
Yeah.
didn't we all do that with our pens?
Yeah.
You know, or our cigarette. You know, when people smoke, the cigarette packages in, things like that. So, you know. Again, the merchandising, the fact it was everyday objects, I think, and the gun is very interesting. As you said, you know, one of the interesting things about the gun, and of course with U.N.C.L.E, was they didn't actually shoot anybody with bullets. It was all meant to be like sleep dart.
Right.
You know, I had read that you know, Norman Felton used to get very upset if it actually gave the impression that somebody had been shot with a bullet and killed in an episode. It was like, no, it has to be sleep darts. So yeah, it was. Again, a very different take just to the sort of stylized violence of Bond or Matt Helm or Derek Flint or whatever else was going on at the time as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's the gun, the toy that was made of the gun is probably the most sought after Man from U.N.C.L.E collectible.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Especially if it's in a mint situation. If you want to get one that's in the box, which it's amazing that those would even still exist, but they come out thousands of dollars.
It always amazes me with any of these, and the same with Bond, any of these franchises, when you actually see stuff from, or Batman, you see stuff from the 60s come up and it's still mint in box or something. It's like, how did that happen? You know,
I always assume
I played with my toys.
Yeah, exactly. I always assume that there must have been some sort of a tragedy involved, which is always sad to consider. You know, Grandma.
There has to be a story as to why this was never opened.
Right, like Grandma had it for a Christmas gift, and then Grandma passed away, and they found it in the attic. You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's a modeling direction to take the conversation. I've always also found it very interesting that the movies that they made that performed so well in overseas market, and how many of those were extended episodes of the show.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like they don't really suffer for it. They still have a pretty good pace.
They are, and there's, you know, in a lot of, I believe a lot of markets, that's what they showed first. I think, I know the first one was pretty much done with the mindset of, you know, we're going to film, well, originally they weren't going to film a pilot because it had Ian Fleming attached to it, and it was like, well, this is an Ian Fleming show, we're just going to put it out without a pilot. And then when Fleming withdrew, the studio were like, well, we want to see a pilot. Which was became the episode The Vulcan Affair, and I think they then shot the extra footage on the basis that if it doesn't work as a pilot, we can at least put it out as a movie and recoup some of our costs. And that worked so well that they ended up doing it throughout the show's run. And I think there was, what was it, 8 movies in the end?
Yeah, I think so. There's a box set of those that I have.
Yeah, I have it upstairs as well. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, it speaks to the great popularity of the show at the time.
Yeah, I think in a lot of foreign markets, that's where it played more is in the, you know, originally in the movie theaters before it went onto the TV syndication run.
Yeah, very unique for entertainment from America at that time, and now it's something very, very common is that movies and shows are made to play well to an international market, whereas well into the 80s, like, you know, the first thing that pops into my mind is like the G.I. Joe cartoon from the 80s, where it was very much American heroes.
Right.
To have a show where you had international characters getting along together and working together as part of a group especially a Russian and an American. It was quite novel.
I think that's, again, one of the appeals of U.N.C.L.E. is the fact that it's this global viewpoint. It's not one particular country or ideology that's driving U.N.C.L.E. You know, they're not there to protect America, just America's interests, or just the Soviets' interest, or just the British interest, like Bond. You know, or they're not guided by one particular government. They sort of sit above and behind all that. And you know, when you really dig into it, you know, Thrush is the bad guys is often described in a couple of the books as a nationless state, you know, of evil, that it works globally. And therefore, you know, U.N.C.L.E. is set to oppose that. So it's this very global organization that works across boundaries, across cultures and stuff. And I think, again, that for the 60s, that was a very forward-thinking idea. And I think one that would actually really resonate well today as well if it was done, if it was modernized. But I think that, again, was part of the appeal. Though, of course, that Russian was played by a Scottish-British actor, so with a beautiful haircut. So, but even so, you know, he was clearly meant. I mean, there's one episode where he is in Soviet Army uniform, so you know, he is meant to be seen as a, you know, a member of the Soviet forces as well as a member of U.N.C.L.E. So.
Yeah, and of course, he became something of a sex symbol at the time. Was sort of often cast in the same light as the Beatles.
Yes, sometimes referred to as the fifth Beatle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of thought of as like a, I don't know if mod was really what they were going for, but definitely sort of an avant-garde free thinker. You know, one of my favorite lines in all of U.N.C.L.E. and really in all of fiction is when I think Napoleon buzzes in and says, "Are you free?" And he says, "No man that works is ever truly free, but I am available for you."
Yeah, it's a very, very philosophical character. Likes his jazz music, and you know, wearing his, you know, he's a hep cat with his turtlenecks and stuff like that. You know, again, some of the stuff I was reading, doing some of the research for the background project, was that they very, very quickly latched on to the fact that David McCallum and I've just blanked. Napoleon Solo actor.
Oh, yeah. What is this?
I just blanked on his name. Isn't that horrible?
It's awful. I do that. You know what? I find that I do that more and more during all of this, during COVID and this whole thing.
Yeah. Anyway, the two of them, it was clear early on they got on.
This is pretty embarrassing that we can't.
It's very embarrassing, isn't it? Robert Vaughn.
Yeah.
Robert Vaughn, yes. How he and David McCallum,
Robert Vaughn, of course.
yeah,
Gosh.
got on. Even before they started showing the movie, showing the series. So by the time they actually started showing it, I believe they had like 4 episodes where it was just Robert Vaughn.
Yeah.
But instead of showing those at the beginning, which is the way they were filmed, they sort of started interspersing the David McCallum episodes in. So you didn't get a run of just Robert Vaughn on his own. You got like, and also in the thing that Robert Vaughn put together to sell it to the series to the network, where he was doing like a monologue introducing the characters. Even then, I think he said something around, with Ilya Kuryakin, you're going to be seeing a lot of this guy. So very early on, they figured out that even though it was meant to be the man from U.N.C.L.E. and Napoleon Solo show, I think they very early recognized it was going to be the two of them together, sparking off each other. And they had such a great relationship, both the actors, and I'm sure they could remember each other's names, but both the actors and the characters, I think, just sparked off each other so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if there were a lot of notes from the network on Kuryakin. Like if there was a lot of like, don't make him too sympathetic. I wonder if there was people that were angry that there was a Russian character that was depicted as.
Yeah, I don't think they really played up. There was only a few times they really played up the Russian thing. I mean, I would say probably 80% of the time, you just think he was, you know, a hit guy with a funny name.
Yeah.
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 So,
Great character. I always thought it was interesting also that Robert Vaughn went on to do a lot of roles in which he played the villain or sort of a shady character or someone who was in some ways bent or sideways, like in Bullet, for example.
right.
That's sort of the next thing I always think of when I think of Robert Vaughn is his role in Bullet.
Yeah.
And
I tend to think of him in The Magnificent Seven, where he basically played the coward. But whatever,
yeah,
you're pretty much right. From that point on, he played against the Napoleon Solo archetype, probably so he wouldn't get typecast. It was
right.
like, look, it's not the goody two-shoes all the time. I can be, I can
Yeah.
play these.
Well,
roles.
and it makes me feel like he was had a certain giving nature about him, because I know that back then, especially in a way that's not as much the case now, a lot of male actors especially didn't want to be in roles where they lost or were made to look weak for fear of becoming typecast in that direction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'll go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's a good observation. And he was clearly had a wide range as an actor and wanted to show that. I think.
Yeah. I assume you saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes. Yes.
The point towards the beginning of the movie when DiCaprio's character talks to Al Pacino, and Al Pacino points out that he plays the heavy, as they call it, in all these TV shows, is like basically just like him just tripping down a hill of his career. And I immediately thought of Robert Vaughn in that sense. But then Robert Vaughn went from TV to movies, which back then especially not everyone got to do.
Right, and there was actually definitely a career progression, which these days it's more of an equal thing. So
yeah, I mean, there's so much great TV. You know, the other thing I think that's interesting about TV shows from that time is just how many episodes there were of everything. I mean, in order to sort of keep up a level of quality control over the course of these massive seasons, I think really speaks a lot to the quality of the show overall.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, shows back then, I guess it was driven by advertising, but whatever, and the ratings. One of the interesting things the podcast I was listening to yesterday was saying that around the ratings with U.N.C.L.E. was that originally the ratings were pretty low and they weren't sure it was going to last the first season until it got to around Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving and Christmas, the ratings spiked. And they figured it out. One of the reasons was that Nielsen didn't measure students. They measured families viewing.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But they didn't measure students and young kids. So when all the kids came back from college, where they'd been watching Man from U.N.C.L.E, but it hasn't been measured, and they came back into the family house, suddenly the family viewership for U.N.C.L.E went up. And it was like, oh, maybe we do have something here. So it was like
where somebody that age would be considered a more valuable asset than that. It's very interesting. I never heard that before. That's really something.
Yeah, I hadn't heard it until yesterday, and it was like, oh yeah, you know, that sort of makes sense because it very much had that appeal to, you know, the younger audience who like the adventure, but they didn't get measured, and then the appeal to the sort of the students. You know, that's where Ilya Kuryakin's attraction was, and that whole you know multinational sort of approach to it. So yeah. That's
very interesting. I wonder how they used to, was that back when the Nielsen, it was like a book they would send out, you were to fill out what you watched?
I assume so, yeah.
I had it for a while where it was in my TV. I was actually a Nielsen family.
Oh, you had the box top sets?
Yeah, I came in and took my TV apart and put a thing inside of it, and then they knew what I watched all the time.
Oh, scary.
Yeah, I don't think I would do it now. It was a strange thing to. At the time I just enjoyed the novelty of it. It was really a lot of responsibility because I wanted to make sure that I watched things that were good.
Yeah.
Stay on the air. It really made me a more conscientious viewer, I guess we could say.
Yeah. So that's interesting because that would then skew the results because they're not getting just regular. You know, if you know you're being, it's the whole who watches the watcher and. You know, that thing of
it's very true. I guess maybe a lot of people just don't even think about it, but
Yeah.
I did. I thought about it a lot. I wanted to make sure that I was watching good stuff, so that it would continue to exist. Was
Yeah.
the idea to
Yeah.
cast a vote for quality entertainment. When did you first discover Uncle?
You know, I was thinking about this. I actually think it was probably a comic. Actually, in the cupboard
One of
behind.
the Gold Key books, I would assume.
No,
Right?
a British comic called TV Tornado. If I'd
Oh,
prepped for this better, I would have got it out of the cupboard behind me. But there was a British comic called TV Tornado, which had, because that was the only way you could keep up with your TV shows then, between the episodes was, you know, comic strips. And there was an anthology British comic I grew up with, which had strips for Bonanza, Lone Ranger, Batman, Superman, Tarzan, and one of the strips in that was The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And I think that, and I remember getting the Corgi Thrushbuster card
Sure. Yeah.
when I was a kid. And I remember watching it on TV when it's first run in the UK. So I think it was just sort of, I don't think it was one thing. I think it was like, you know, an awareness of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. in comics and just and toys generally. And, you know, I was also, you know, a big James Bond geek from probably the age of 10. So I think it was just all sort of came together, and it was just part of that continuation. Yeah.
Who
So,
do you
you know,
think did the art in those comics? Has that been determined?
sorry?
The art in those comics that you referred to? Who
Yeah.
was responsible for those?
Oh, ooh, I have no idea who the creative teams were.
Yes.
They didn't put credits on them back
The
then.
kind of thing where it wasn't credited, and it's sort of now it's just a matter of speculation, right?
Yeah, and actually, a lot of them, they actually also just had text stories in. They had like a 2 or 3 page ankle text story adventure in them as well. So,
It's very interesting. I'll have to track that down. I have a book of Avengers comics that were all sort of like one pages at a time,
yeah,
and they're in color, and they're almost like photorealistic.
yeah,
I wonder if those are from there.
yeah, maybe. So you mean Avengers, Mrs. Peel and John
Yeah,
Cena?
indeed,
Yes.
yes. The original Avengers. It's
Yeah.
important to note, although it sticks in some people's crawls. Yeah.
So yeah, so really that, you know, that was the way we kept up with, you know, like I say, we kept up with our shows, was just the comic strips. So, that was pretty much how I get it. And it's been interesting trying to sort of track those down as I've been doing research, just trying to track down those stories and reread
I'd
those
imagine
stories.
it's quite hard. Those are probably not easy to put your hands on.
No, some of them aren't. Yeah, like I say, I have a few, but I'm still missing quite a few. Yeah.
Very good. The Gold Key comic, I always thought it was funny how weird it got. A lot of those Gold Key books that are based on those types of properties are always very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I assume, again, I haven't really dug deep yet, but I assume it was a bit like the Star Trek one where they ended up being farmed out to people who've never seen the show. You know, they just get sent a script and some photos, some stills, and have to figure stuff out themselves. So yeah, the Gold Key one's got really, really funky.
I have one where Solo and Kuryakin, they get hit with some sort of a grow ray that makes them gigantic.
Yeah.
And they're like in a village somewhere in Eastern Europe, and they're trying not to stomp on any of the villagers and kill them because of their massive size.
All those series, they have a Land of the Giants type one where they end up being shrunk, or they have a grow one, or they have a, you know, somebody gets a big head, or I don't know, you know. There's like 4 or 5 standard plot tropes that get recycled through all of those.
Yeah. I find the older I get, the weirder I like those things. The more sort of brand and rip off based and whacked out, the better I like it. I find it's not too concerned about continuity or where it's supposed to fit in with the mythos and whether or not it's okay to read it.
Yeah. I've always said, people sometimes ask me, you know, given the fact I've done licensed comics and written licensed comics on and off over the years, you know, what license would I really like to write? And U.N.C.L.E. is always top of the list. I'd love to do a good U.N.C.L.E. book, but I know one publishing company I was involved with, we did actually put some feelers out about getting an U.N.C.L.E. license, and the terms and that they wanted just made it an impossible prospect commercially, or even just in terms of who kept the rights to the stories and stuff. It just got messy.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame. I think if they just eased up a bit on some of their rights demands, more folks would be wanting to do them. But I'd love to write an U.N.C.L.E, either an in period or an updated version of U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be very good. The I know that there was at least like a Batman '66 Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then maybe Dynamite or somebody like that, one of those companies.
It was DC. Again, it's on my shelf, but I'm not going to get up and get it. But
at any rate, they did that at least, and
they did.
I kind of
but even I know Jeff Parker, who wrote it, says he's a fan of the show.
Oh yeah. Oh, I lost your audio. Can you hear me? You may have muted.
No.
Oh, there you go. I lost your audio for a bit. Sorry. We were just talking about Jeff Parker.
No, I said Jeff Parker's always said he was a big fan of the show, but when you actually read it, it's like, did you watch the show? Because some of the stuff in here doesn't really fit with the guidelines that were set in the show. But yeah, it's. I guess that means that that actually brings Batman into the official U.N.C.L.E. continuity in some way.
Right, which is that's nothing wrong with that. Which also means that in a roundabout way, at the very least, the On Her Majesty's Secret Service version of Bond also lives in the Batman universe, right? The Batman 66 universe, since he appeared in that Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie late in the day.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah, as Agent JB. So yeah. So does The Fugitive as well, because isn't there an episode of The Fugitive where he's walking past Del Floria's?
Yeah, exactly.
And Deep Space Nine. And Deep Space Nine too in the Star Trek universe, because there's actually a Del Floria's on the promenade of Deep Space Nine.
Oh wow, I didn't know that one.
Yeah,
that's excellent. It's all a big conspiracy.
Yeah, so it's all so even in the 24th century, U.N.C.L.E. is still out there.
Yeah, which is good to know, right?
Yeah.
As I recall, you and I are on a similar mindset of the movie that came out a few years ago, which has unfortunately been a bit divisive for a lot of fans.
Yeah, I was actually wondering which T-shirt to wear, whether I should wear this one or my actually U.N.C.L.E. 2015 one, but I thought that might upset a few people. So I put
yeah, well, especially since we couldn't remember Robert Vaughn's name. It seems like we like the movie.
My memory's going. Yeah, the movie's interesting. I'm doing some research around Ian Fleming at the moment, so apologies for keep dropping his name, but it's forefront of mind. I was actually discovered the other fairly recently that they were actually thinking about tagging the new movie as Ian Fleming's Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh wow!
Because which again I didn't know until relatively recently. If you go back and read Fleming's treatment for what became U.N.C.L.E. and particularly the character descriptions, the way that Ilya Kuryakin acts in the movie, which I know a lot of people don't like. And some of the little character tropes that Henry Cavill's Napoleon Solo have are actually right out of Fleming's.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's very vindicating because there's so many Man from U.N.C.L.E. fans that are
right. So it's not the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show, no, but it's actually closer to Ian Fleming's idea of the characters than the TV show ended up being.
Very interesting. Yeah, see, they should have led with that. It would have fit fewer people. I mean, it's Earth 2. I mean, I think that they probably would have been better off to just not call it Man from U.N.C.L.E. and change the names of the characters. And then I think a lot of U.N.C.L.E. fans would have just been like, oh, this is like Man from U.N.C.L.E. and they wouldn't have had a problem with it.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that, U.N.C.L.E., the TV show never did an origin. We just walked straight into the middle. Everything was set up. We didn't really need to know who these characters were. So, why do an origin story? Unfortunately, that seems to be, the expected thing. You launch any franchise with an origin story these days. Nobody seems to be able to just give people credit that you can drop into the middle of a story and figure things out. But I actually thought it was a very stylish homage to the 1960s spy movie genre.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies, if we're being honest. I
Yeah,
thought it
yeah.
was fantastic. Yeah,
I love Daniel Pemberton's score. I thought it was really well
yeah,
acted.
all the music is really outstanding. A lot of sort of unusual choices for the soundtrack. You know, a Nina Simone song
Yeah,
that I'd never heard before that. I mean, it was just like, you know, as soon as it opened with that Roberta Flack song, I was like, okay, they made this for me and maybe
yeah.
500 people.
I think there was a couple of missteps in the end in trying to tie it into Uncle. It's the dialogue's a bit clunky. That last scene about we've got a new code name. It's Uncle. It's like
Yeah.
The fact that they never actually other than on the radio you never heard the theme or anything like that. They didn't play to it. But was it an Uncle movie? If you're thinking about the TV show, no, not really.
Right.
But I think there was a basis there, and I will say I think the best chance Uncle's got of going in the future is the fact that Henry Cavill, Barney Hammer, and Guy Ritchie, and one of the producers, who I've completely blanked on the name again, are still actively trying to drum up interest in carrying it forward. So I think Uncle's future pretty much rests with those guys, and they've got the interest now. Of course, if Henry Cavill gets cast as Bond or something, that's going to throw that out of the window. But he seems to be getting cast as everybody else. I mean, I just watched Enola Holmes last night, so now he's ticked off Sherlock Holmes. So
Amazing, right?
he seems to be going through all the pop culture iconic characters,
one after the other.
Yeah.
I feel like that the movie has become sort of a cult hit.
Yes.
I don't know a lot of people who saw it in the theater, but I know a lot of people who saw it on HBO or whatever. And it's one of those deals where the DVD is like $5 at Walmart, and it's always sort of like front and center.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people have seen it since. It seems to be garnering interest. It's interesting also that before it came to Guy Ritchie, Tom Cruise had been toying with it. They had been considering it for a modern day adaptation. And once Ritchie was attached, it became what it became. And it's one of those types of movies, I think, where another one of my favorite movies is Tom Hanks, That Thing You Do, the movie about the one-hit wonders. That movie wouldn't have been made if he hadn't made it. I mean, there's just certain things, period pieces especially, that studios are very wary of. And if somebody has the money and the latitude to do it, that's sort of how it has to happen, I find.
I think it's probably a weird comparison. But I sort of compare it to David Lynch's Dune.
Yeah.
In the fact that, here was this property that there's been so many people have been trying to get up and running, and it's the same for Uncle over the years. There were so many attempts to get it up and running. David Lynch got it done. Whether you like it or not, he did it, he got it done, and he got it on the screen.
Yeah.
Whether you like Guy Ritchie's Uncle or not, he did it, he got it done, and he got it out on the screen, and he put the property front and center, but in pop culture in 2015, and brought a lot of new fans to the franchise. So I'm not going to knock him for that. Is it the Uncle movie I would have made? No. Or written? No. But like I said, it's one of my as a homage to the 1960s spy movies. I think it's really stylish and really well done. And I don't think it would have taken too much to actually really make it a good Uncle movie as well.
Yeah, I think Kuryakin is probably the main sticking point.
Yeah, but that's Ian Fleming's Kuryakin. That's not the David McCallum.
Right. Well, I mean, you kind of blew my mind with that one. I wasn't aware of that at all. Yeah.
Well, at least that's what I heard. So I'll have to sort of, I know a friend of mine has a copy of the treatment. I'll have to go bug him next time I see him and say, can I read that? Just to verify that's the case.
Maybe he drops acid a couple of times or something and loosens up. Walters makes him more of a hip cat,
Yeah.
That's the deal. That is one case, and I'm with you. I'm usually not too thrilled when a movie takes that origin story approach. Every Spider-Man movie, it feels like the most recent ones, we had to have the spider bite again, and all of that. And it's like, it's part of the lexicon. If you bought a ticket, chances are you know it. But I think in the case of Man from U.N.C.L.E, it's good because We never figured it out, and that's an interesting story. How did these two agents of their own countries during the Cold War become chummy?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think part of the issue there is, you know, if you go back to the TV show and the books and everything, U.N.C.L.E existed a long time before these two guys. It wasn't built around these two guys. It was an existing organization. They just happened to be employees or agents of U.N.C.L.E and who worked together as a team. Well, the movie made it seem like it came together because of those two, which, you know, clearly it didn't. You know, again, if you dive deep into it, you know, the idea is that basically Thrush, you know, the first head of Thrush was Moriarty, and it's been around since, you know, the 1890s and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you watch one of the TV shows, there's a guy in there who's having his retirement party from Thrush after 35 years of service. So, you know, and that's in the 60s. So, you know, Thrush and U.N.C.L.E have been at each other for a long time, much longer than Solo and Kuriakin have been around. So I think, again, that's one of the areas where I think that the movie missed a beat. I think it could have been, you know, that U.N.C.L.E already existed, but these two guys, you know, came together and as a team to solve a problem, then which would make them ideal agents for U.N.C.L.E and bring them into the organization that maybe we'd have hints of throughout the movie or whatever.
Yeah,
just my 2 cents worth.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's I don't know how well the title works with today's audiences that wouldn't be familiar with it. Like, what does that even mean, Man from U.N.C.L.E?
Right.
I mean, they never spell out the acronym. And then, I mean, at the end, when it just kind of comes out of nowhere, it's like they bank on you knowing what that is, but they've also made a movie that's very different from what the TV show is. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can see how it would be alienating for a lot of people. I don't think it's quite the same level as, say, Mission Impossible, when in the first one they reveal all the revered characters to have been traitors.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like just for the sake of sort of shocking the viewer. But for whatever reason,
but again, I mean, people say that about the first Mission Impossible movie and the Jim Phelps character. I know we're going off slightly tangent here, but how many people in that movie audience knew who Jim Phelps was outside the confines of that movie? Probably about 3 people in the audience. Of which you and I were 2. You know, so was it that big a betrayal within the context of that story? No, not really. But they could have chosen a different character name. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I would like if, since there won't probably be any more movies unless something really kind of miraculous happens, I would love it if there was some sort of a comic or a series of novels based in that world as well.
I would too. Like I said, you know, when I was involved in one attempt to do something like that, it's just just the legal side of it was just not set up to make it attractive for anybody to go out and use the license. And hopefully that will change. We used to think that about the James Bond license for, like, we didn't have any Bond comics for over a decade, and then, you know.
Now they're back now, and they're pretty good. The last time I checked.
Yeah, so they're really good right now. So, you know, who knows? Never, as somebody else said, never say never. So.
Yeah. Exactly. Sounds like you got a beep on your side.
Yeah, that was me. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. Well, Alan, it's been great talking and catching up with you.
And it's an hour gone already. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Just about. Yeah. I find that it's good to keep these things under an hour. I feel like once you get past an hour on these types that you can watch at home, I think it gets a little itchier for people to tune in.
Yeah.
And,
very much so.
But always a pleasure, and I'll follow your Twitter feed, and tell me again about the books that the audience might be interested in reading from you and how the best to find them.
Okay, if you want to, James Bond, I wrote James Bond, The History of the Illustrated 007, which is the history of Bond in comics around the world. It's available.
Which I have that book. It's very good.
Thank you. Currently in production is the James Bond Lexicon, which is a to Z encyclopedia of all things Bond, which, like I say, I don't know a publication date yet. It is in production. And you can get me the spy stuff on Twitter. I have 2 main spy-related accounts, at Bond Lexicon, and more for this one, at U.N.C.L.E Lexicon, which is, like I say, is just a on and off projects I've got sort of going in the background at the moment. So you can find me there, or at Alan J. Porter, just for my general writing stuff. So.
Very good. Highly recommended.
Thank you.
If you're looking for me, you can, if you Google my name, you'll find things. If you go on Amazon, you can find some of my books in physical and ebook format. For people that would be interested in this, I recommend Ben Venice, which is my my work of flash fiction installment, 60s spy-fi thrills.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, I'm having fun with it. Thanks
Great.
so much. Thanks to you, and thanks to everybody who watched.
Thank you, folks. Enjoy the rest of SpyCon virtually, and hopefully we will see you in, a few of you in Atlanta next year. Hopefully.
Very good. Stay healthy.
All right. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.